840-9623. Once again, 840-9623. And now, Jim Barry, president of the Barry Company, will introduce our esteemed speaker for today.
Thank you, President Steve. Good afternoon. I can think of no better way to introduce our speaker today than to quote from the introduction to William Manchester's excellent biography of him, The Last Lion. I bring you back in time to May 1840. The French had collapsed. The Dutch had been overwhelmed. The Belgian ports, converging on a fishing town whose name was Dunkirk. Behind them lay the sea.
Perhaps we should introduce our speaker directly. Steve, do you want to suggest that, and we'll text Jim?
Yeah, we'll let Jim know that we're having technical difficulties. I don't know if any of you had the opportunity last year to meet Sir Winston Churchill in person at our club. It was a wonderful experience. This is the real thing. It was an inspiring event, and we thought there would be no better thing to bring to Rotary at this point in time than an inspirational message from the man who lived through some of the worst times in the 20th century. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sir Winston Churchill.
I come before you at a moment in history with the world in crisis, from the Far East in Europe, from Africa to the Americas, to every corner of the globe. A pandemic virus of epic proportions, a silent killer has attacked humanity, striking suddenly and killing wantonly. Coronavirus, global economies faltering, world death toll passes 200,000. You are all in something called a lockdown. Social distancing, flattening the curve. Every continent is this humanity's greatest fear. What happened? Are we still broadcasting? Are we here?
Yes, we are.
Oh, we are. Oh, all right. Something happened to my screen here. So we are still broadcasting. Good. Nations are fighting to protect the most vulnerable with the greatest weapons 21st century science can create. I have no doubt that preparations are being made to ultimately defeat this coronavirus. This virus is tyrannical. Mankind's very way of life is under attack. But overcome we must. And overcome we shall. We shall not be found wanting. The time has come to look back in history. Who holds her shining lamp up for all to see? I should like to discuss the Blitz of London. The Blitz occurred September the 6th of the 7th of 1940 until May the 10th of 1941. The Germans blitzed us with their bombers, the Luftwaffe, those precise, punctual Germans, every evening at approximately the same time. The sirens would sound, dinner, supper would be done, the dishes in the drainer. Everyone would grab their belongings, usually thermos, something to eat, gas mask, and head off to the shelter. And they would join the queue and head into isolation, sometimes beneath the city, sometimes wherever they could find shelter. This occurred nightly. At one point in time, 72 nights in a row. Throughout the process, 40,000 Londoners were killed, many more in other cities. But the Londoners, the British, are unique in this respect, in that they love to hear bad news. The worse, the better. And I gave it to them. My very first speech. And I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. You ask, what is our policy? I will say it is to wage war on the land, on the sea, in the air, with all our might, with all the strength that God can give us, to wage war against a monstrous tyranny, never before encountered in the dark, lamentable catalogue of human crime. That is our policy. You ask, what is our aim? And I can say it in one word. It is victory. Victory at all costs, victory in spite of all terror, victory however long and hard the road may be, for without victory, there can be no survival. And victory we shall have, ladies and gentlemen. My dear Rotarians, did you know that I'm a Rotarian as well? London Club, honorary Rotarian. Couldn't make every meeting like all of you. But I am a Rotarian, and the Rotarians were very, very involved and very busy during the Blitz, helping, of course, their fellow man wherever they could, in the shelters, clearing rubble, excavating, whatever they could do, providing shelter for many. All of the great things in the world have been done in the name of Rotary, the greatest indeed. And you shall do great things today, here, during this coronavirus crisis. But I would posit this, that one of the greatest challenges that we all shall face is looking in the mirror and then going out and touching the troops. That's what I called it. I would go to the roof when the siren would sound and wait for the bombers to come. And they would come every single night. I needed to see where the worst of that night's bombing was located. For afterwards, now I would jump into my armored car and go to the worst of it, to be with the British people. And that is what you must do next. You must be with each other. You must be unafraid. This will be the great challenge moving forward for every single one of you. And I was just astonished and stunned by the resilience of the British people. I'd walk through the streets and they'd say, "Ain't that all they got, Winnie? That all it has got?" And I would say to you, "Is that all the coronavirus has got? It's got nothing on you." All of you, all over the world, because I know there are many people from many countries all over the world listening to this broadcast at this moment. So I would simply say to you, this will be your finest hour. This will be your greatest battlefield of all. Never fear. All will be well. And the final piece of advice I should give you is to keep buggering on. KBO, keep of buggering on. Now, perhaps, there are questions. Does anyone have any ideas for me that I can respond to?
Thank you, Sir Winston. I do have a few questions, and I expect that we'll get some more coming in on the chat here.
Splendid.
I would say let's start with what advice do you have for leaders like yourself in times of crisis? What are the secrets of leadership for the situation we're facing today?
The secrets are very simple, and that is to keep in mind that the people are there waiting to be touched. It is important to be, of course, organized, to have a vision of where you must go. But I believe being able to communicate appropriately with everyone, use simple words as a leader. The small words are the best. And of course, I used the old words because the British people responded to those. An example, never in the field of human conflict has so much been owed by so many to so few. Simple words, simple syllables, so that even the most erudite Oxford Don could understand, as well as the East Ender with a minimal amount of education. It struck to the heart. You must find those words and reach out and be able to communicate simply, forthrightly. And it takes a great deal of work. And they say, my secretaries did, they say that I worked 1 hour for every 1 minute of every speech that I wrote and I gave. And I suppose they're right. So hard work. Keep at it, keep buggering on, use small words, communicate well. My best advice to any leader, my dear.
And so one of the questions really was about whether or not you wrote your own speeches, but I think perhaps you just answered to that yourself.
Well, I did. It was a great deal of effort. You see, when I woke in the morning, I began to speak immediately upon rising. My secretary joining me in the bedroom or nearby, anyway, taking down every single word I said, whether it was correspondence, whether it was a speech, a fleeting idea, they would write it down, they'd give it to me later, type it all out, and have it for me to edit. And so, yes, I wrote every single speech, every single word of it. And if the people found comfort and found inspiration from it, then they have said to me, "Oh, Winston, you inspired a nation. You inspired the world." It was not me. It was the people, the race dwelling round the globe that had the lion's heart. I had the luck to be called upon to give the roar.
Thank you. Today's Prime Minister Boris Johnson was perhaps a bit overconfident when first confronted by COVID-19. He then, of course, was impacted personally. You too, Mr. Churchill, faced personal setbacks from which you had to recover. Do you have any advice for Boris at this time?
Take plenty of penicillin, Boris. It's good for you. And drink plenty of water. Do what the doctors tell you to do. I must admit, I was not a very good patient. I insisted upon getting up and working. Did you know that I had a terrible case of pneumonia during the war? And it was only through the discovery of this wonder drug, this penicillin, that was discovered by Dr. Fleming, of course, that I was able to survive. And I was, of course, nursed very, very well by several people, as Mr. Johnson was. So I can relate certainly to you, Mr. Prime Minister. And I do believe you wrote a book about me. Perhaps offline we could talk about a few details which you didn't get quite right for us.
Well, here's another question that has a similar vein, which is in times of crisis, what should we as leaders do to take care of ourselves? We're talking about taking our medicine. Do you have other advice?
Take care of yourselves by reaching out to as many people as you possibly can. The greatest leaders are those who are servants to the ones that they are serving. We are, after all, if we are politicians, if we are leaders, if we are called to that the greatest of all pinnacles, which is the pinnacle of leadership, we must be willing to bow down and serve those that we are leading. Only then will they respond positively and kindly. You must show the example. You must be kind to others, lead others by example. It is the only way.
Here's a question from President Steve. Did any of your subjects rebel against some of your wisdom?
Any of my subjects? Well, as far as I know, His Majesty was still taking care of that kind of business. But if you're talking about my my compatriots, possibly. Yes, there was some discord. After all, we did not win a battle until El Alamein. That was a real battle, which was late in 1942. You must understand that. And so as a result, many, not too many, but a few, were completely against what I was attempting to do, run the war. And after all, I had taken much on my shoulders. And there were two instances during the war where there was a vote of no confidence. Fortunately for me, personally, and I hope for the British people, it was roundly defeated. So, of course, a politician, Steve, must have the ability to predict what is going to happen next month, next year, and in the coming years. And afterwards, have the ability to explain why it did not happen.
There you go.
Don't forget that, Steve, as president.
All right. I think this is from Karen. What are some of the tangible parallels from historic times that we can draw from this time? Draw from this time.
Draw forth, indeed. It strikes me that the British people during the war were very much at home, were very much feeling like they were on the front lines, being bombed, of course, consistently every single night. And it just didn't end in May of 1941, of course. We were still getting V1s and V2s right up until the end of the war, the rockets that were coming over. So the British people really felt as if they were right there on the front lines. And I believe that all of us today, as we are sequestered in our homes and possibly very quietly in our places of business, but certainly kept apart from each other, a very difficult, you must admit, a very difficult and trying exercise. We had very much the same thing. Yes, we were together, perhaps, in shelters, those types of things, but there was a sense of feeling alone, that it was you against the Germans, the bombers, the Luftwaffe, and you must have that sense, I believe. The other thing, of course, is freedom. Freedom is what will bring us out of it. If I may read a few words from a speech that I gave in Bristol on the 19th of April, 1941. And I go about the country whenever I can escape for a few hours or a day from my duty at headquarters. And I see the damage done by the enemy attacks. But I also see, side by side, with the devastation and amid the ruins, quiet, confident, bright and smiling eyes, beaming with a consciousness of being associated with a cause far higher and wider than any human nor personal issue. I see the spirit of an unconquerable people. I see the spirit bred in freedom, nursed in a tradition which has come down to us through the centuries, and which will surely, at this moment, this turning point in history of the world, enable us to bear our part. Indeed, this will be your finest hour. You must make it so.
Thank you. We have a question here from past President Dr. John Ridley. Do you have any regrets as you look back upon your leadership during World War II?
No. Next
Okay.
question.
Well,
You must never
quick.
look back, John, and have regrets. There are, you can look back on your disappointments and learn from them. But regrets, decisions need to be made, and they must be lived with, and without regret. Good question.
Once the Germans started bombing the civilian population of Great Britain, as we talked a little bit about earlier, how did you and your government deal with the daily toll of deaths, and how did you communicate this to your fellow countrymen?
My dear, you must learn as a politician and as a steward of the government and of a difficult crisis situation, learn to tell the truth. The truth. For a politician, what a novel approach, eh? Telling the truth is so important. Here's why. Because then the people will believe you. You do not have to look over your shoulder, no matter how bad the news is. For instance, we sent children into the countryside when the bombing started, and some even decided to send their children overseas, to Canada, to the United States, to Australia, to be with friends, relatives, this type of thing. Well, one of the ships that was carrying the children was torpedoed by a German submarine, and it was sunk with very few survivors. And that was news that I had to give the British people, and they took it. And you can imagine how they took it, very emotionally, very straight. But we bore up. That was the time, of course, you needed to make a decision. And we decided after that, of course, to no longer load children onto ships. We should keep them in country. But being able to tell the truth and to live with it so that the people will believe you does a very simple thing. It builds trust. It's a very simple mathematical equation. Truth plus belief equals trust. And that is all any leader can hope for, is it not? Cat got your tongue?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to, sorry, I want to just tell the audience, we have questions coming in on chat and on Q&A, and I'm having a little trouble going back and forth. So if you could put your questions in chat, it makes it a lot easier for me. So thank you. After World War II, the British economy was devastated and remained very depressed for years thereafter. What lessons can you impart to a country seeking to restore its economic vitality after a national calamity?
Re-elect Winston Churchill in 1951. That was it.
Well, that'll solve it.
Very simple solution. What suggestions? We had the government that took over in 1945. I was voted out of office. You know, my wife said to me, she said, Winston, don't you think that losing this election is a blessing in disguise? I retorted, Clement, if this is a blessing, it is very effectively disguised. Huh? Well, I was out of office, of course, for 6 years, but still a member of parliament and leader of the opposition. And what we suggested very gently was getting back to a free market economy. We went quite the opposite direction for a period of 6 years. And once we shouldered back in and took part in free market economy, made some changes, got back in the swing of things, well, the people embraced it very carefully and very wonderfully. And of course, you can see today that Britain is still a great economic power in the world. Little bitty island. Amazing, is it not? The free market economy.
Free market economy.
That's the way to do it.
How did you manage personal freedoms with the safety of the British people?
Well, the British are very good at taking direction. You know, mind this, do that, turn here, turn there. They were excellent at taking direction. And most of the directions that we gave were meant for their personal safety. And as a result, we had very, very little discord as far as personal safety for the individuals. Of course, some people decided that they wanted to go out on their own and hold dinner parties in buildings as the bombs were coming down. And occasionally they had to pay the price, of course. But people got tired of going down in cellars, going here, going there. So many people just decided, you know what, I'm just going to ride it out. If it's my time, it's my time. And there was a sense, to a certain extent, a fatalistic sense. You can imagine night after night after night, these bombs coming down and going down in a hole in the ground. So it was very disconcerting for many people. And you must have that same feeling today, some of you, being cooped up in your house, on your couch, in your man cave. And so you can understand you must get out if you can. Take exercise. We encouraged it. It was astonishing, actually, after a night's bombing, how normal the city seemed. Shopkeepers with their windows blown out, glass everywhere, picking up pieces of glass and still doing business. Yes, Governor, may I help you? And what would you like? Would you like the pork or the veal? Astonishing how they carried on. So just be matter of fact. Keep buggering on, KBO.
KBO. KBO.
That's the
So
way
Winston, you were sought out by the people of Britain during an existential crisis to lead in a certain way. Yet after the war, we're not stood up to lead the rebirth of the country. How do leaders in crisis differ from those who lead in times of plenty?
Splendid question.
It is a good question. This is from President-elect Darren Miller.
Well, he'll be a fine leader. And it was a very long question, Darren. You're going to have to shorten it up just a little bit. But okay, plenty and in times of a very serious shortage. They're really one and the same, I believe. You must lead when you have plenty. You must lead as if there is a shortage, because somewhere in the world there is shortage, there is difficulty, there is something going on, whether it be a natural disaster or some political, perhaps a war. And that, my dear friend, is where Rotary comes in, does it not? When there is a crisis, Rotarians are there. I believe, from what someone has told me, 2.1 million members these days around the world, helping each other. And so when you have times of plenty, learn how to share it.
That's very wise advice. Thank you. What are the opportunities that exist in a crisis? Just generally speaking.
The pessimist, of course, sees the difficulty in every opportunity, but the optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. I experienced many personal difficulties in my life and obstacles. You can either decide to be taken apart by them, or you can make the decision to overcome them by being positive. For instance, we took the bombing of our cities, and we turned them into opportunities to get closer to each other. Such a spirit. I meet people even today who, as children, went through the Blitz, and they said it was the most exhilarating and exciting time of their lives. And they should never forget it. And they learned to be closer to their fellow man as a result of it. And I pray that this coronavirus brings people closer together, that we do not distance from each other, and that we come closer together. Do not be afraid. Go hug somebody.
There are lots of positive comments coming in here. Great job. In God we trust. So thank you for that. And we have another question coming in here, which is, how do you personally keep your spirits up during these difficult times? There we go.
It doesn't hurt.
It doesn't hurt.
It doesn't hurt. How do I personally keep my spirits up? Well, of course, when you surround yourself with wonderful advisors, as I had throughout the war, throughout my entire career, it was astonishing how people would come and just be there, even if you didn't ask them. Evidently, if you're doing the right thing, people will come and they will help you, and they will be a help to you, and you will be a help to them. That, after all, is what the moral compass is all about, is it not?
It is. Another question from Karen Hung. What is one important thing from historic, human, and global challenges that you would suggest we do differently as part of past learning? So not a regret, but just learn from experience.
And I have always said it is better to jaw than to war. Mm-hmm. And I would say the summit meeting, you know, when I became prime minister for the second time, it was at the same time that General Eisenhower became president of the United States. I sincerely believed that I could be the agent to bring both the Soviet Union and the United States together to the bargaining table, because this hydrogen bomb business was very, very trying, was it not? We thought we could completely blow the planet to smithereens. And so I proposed something called a summit meeting. And it stuck, I believe, up until this day. I believe we needed to get together. But of course, dear President Eisenhower had John Foster Dulles as his Secretary of State. He was a bit of a stick in the mud. My nickname for him was Dull Duller Dulles. Decided he didn't want anything to do with the Soviet Union. So I would say replace that attitude with a spirit of being able just to talk with each other. I believed all my life, and it was borne out through the war and through every period of time, that the most effective form of communication was face to face, eyeball to eyeball, nose to nose, jaw to jaw, not war. So get together personally, talk it out, hash it out. That's what we should do differently, and not via chat snaps or book facing or whatever we're doing here. This is fine. However, we need to get back together.
I think that again is very sound and reasonable advice. That as Rotarians, I think we all know the value of being together and connecting and speaking to one another openly and honestly. Have you ever had a chat with Dame Edna? Now that is a conversation that I would love to listen to, and I'm not quite sure who that's from. I'm guessing it's a friend of yours. I don't think it's someone in.
No, I'm afraid Dame Edna and I are quite the opposite, or perhaps we're the same. Just one moment, please.
Jaw.
No, let's just put it this way. No, but I would like to.
Okay.
There you are. I'll talk to anyone.
Well, I don't know. We're getting a little down. We're getting specific here, but what do you think? What are your views on opening establishments before dates set by the governors? So that you can take that up a little bit to a different level of, going back.
Let me give you an example from my own time. I cannot speak to any governor here in the United States or anyone around the world today, of course, because I died in 1965. However, I can tell you what the theater owners and those involved with the nightclubs and that kind of music, that kind of thing, back during the Blitz, they came to me and they said, Mr. Prime Minister, do you think perhaps we should close the clubs? Should we close the theaters because of the bombing, just to protect people? And my response was, what then are we fighting for? People need the theater. They need the music. You just had the Florentine Opera on just now. How much are artists struggling during this current period, not being able to reach an audience personally, attempting to get their art form, whatever it is, whether it is music or theatrical or even the visual arts. How difficult is it for people in the arts? And so we did not close the theaters. We did not close the music halls. We kept them open. We turned the lights out when the bombs came, but we turned them back on again because we needed to hear the music. The music needed to keep right on. And so I would say to those of you who wish to close down, make every effort to keep it open because we need it.
Okay. Well, I think we are through our list of questions here in case, unless anyone wants to send anything else in, but we have been.
What a splendid group of questions they were.
We have quite a splendid audience, and they were very appreciative of your willingness to come back and to share some wisdom from your great reservoir of experience. And so thank you. And on behalf of everybody who's been asking questions and had the pleasure of listening to you today, and I'm going to turn this back to President Steve.
Thank you for a wonderful program, Sir Winston. We're going to try to keep the music going with our Florentine snack events that are coming up, at least internally. Who better to consult during these trying times than Winston Churchill? And I wonder, is there a way that our audience could actually reach out to you to learn more?
Well, yes, of course, Steve. My name is Randy Otto, O-T-T-O, backwards or frontwards, born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, as some of you know. I live here in the area. I live in Lake Mills, Wisconsin. I'm in my basement right now. If any of you have a need, whether it's in the corporate boardroom, in the classroom, I just had a request from a fellow in Texas to talk to a Hispanic council. I do these things on a regular basis. I would be happy to join you briefly, fire up the troops, whatever you needed to do. And you can reach me at churchillspeaker.com, or certainly contact your brain trust. Mary would be very happy, I'm sure, to share my contact information with you if you have a need or you know someone who has a need. And I would also finally like to say that the Churchill Society of Wisconsin is alive and well and living in Milwaukee. We meet at the Milwaukee Club. And the proceeds of my talk today, I must say thank you to the Rotary Club. The remuneration that you give to a speaker is going towards that organization to further the knowledge about Winston and what he had to offer the world. And I hope today I gave you a little bit of that. Thank you for this opportunity.
And thank you. And we have indeed made a donation to the Churchill Society in honor of your speaking to us today and preserving the thoughts, words, and deeds of Sir Winston Churchill. So just a quick few closing announcements. Look at your screen for some of our upcoming virtual events after this program ends. Visit the links in our survey email after the meeting to join our post-meeting breakout session or to register for our Thursday snack program with the Florentine or with our Beer Connector. Next week, we'll hear from Austin Ramirez, the president and CEO of Husco International. I always look forward to hearing him. If you can join us for the post-meeting conversation, look for the link that should be in your email box. We hope to see you there. It's a nice, small, casual conversation. So having said all that, let's go out and do some good in the world today. Keep fighting the good fight. This meeting is adjourned.
Never give in.